The sun blazed down on the dusty street of Red Cloud, Nebraska, on the afternoon that would change everything. And Katherine Walsh saw her first, fingers flying through hemp strands with the practiced ease of someone who had been working with rope since childhood. He had ridden into town that morning in June of 1878, his horse tired from 3 days of hard travel from Wyoming Territory, where the ranch he worked had finally gone under after a brutal winter killed half the herd. The owner sold what remained and paid the hands their final wages, leaving Katherine at 26 years old with a pocketful of money and no clear direction for the first time since he was 16. Red Cloud seemed as good a place as any to stop, rest his mount, and figure out what came next. The general store needed supplies he could not afford yet. The saloon held no appeal in the middle of the day, and the hotel wanted payment upfront for a room. So Katherine walked his horse down the main street, taking in the modest but growing town with its neat rows of buildings, the train depot at the far end promising connection to the wider world, and the people going about their business with the determined energy of those building something lasting in hard country. That was when he saw her, sitting on a 3-legged stool outside what looked like a livery stable, her dark hair pulled back in a long braid that hung down past her shoulders, her fingers moving with hypnotic rhythm as she worked 3 strands of hemp into a length of rope. She wore a simple brown skirt and a cream-colored blouse with the sleeves rolled up past her elbows, and her face held a concentration so complete she seemed unaware of the world around her. Katherine stopped without meaning to, his horse huffing softly beside him. He had seen plenty of ranch hands braid rope before, had done it himself countless times, but something about the way this woman worked held him transfixed. Her movements were economical, efficient, almost graceful, and the rope forming under her hands looked tight and even, the kind of work that would hold under pressure. She must have sensed his attention because she looked up, and Katherine found himself staring into the most striking brown eyes he had ever seen. They were the color of good whiskey held up to lamplight, warm and deep, and they regarded him with a directness that made him forget for a moment that staring was rude. "Can I help you with something?" Her voice carried a slight edge, the tone of someone who had dealt with unwanted attention before and had no patience for it. "Sorry, I did not mean to stare," Katherine said, finding his manners. "I have just never seen anyone braid rope quite that fast before." Her expression softened slightly, suspicion giving way to something that might have been pride. "Been doing it since I was 12. My father ran this stable before he passed 2 years ago. Braiding rope was one of the first things he taught me, said if I was going to work with horses I needed to know how to make and mend every piece of equipment myself." "He taught you well." Katherine took a step closer, leading his horse. "That is fine work. Thank you." She set down the partially completed rope and stood, brushing dust from her skirt. She was tall for a woman, he noted, probably about 5 feet 7 inches, with strong shoulders and capable hands. "Your horse looks like he has traveled far." 3 days from Wyoming. The ranch I worked went under." Understanding flickered across her face. "The winter killed a lot of operations. I am sorry." "Such is the life." Katherine shrugged, though the loss sat heavier on him than he wanted to admit. "I am Katherine Walsh. People call me Cade. Violet Richardson." She extended her hand like a man would, and Katherine shook it, noting the firm grip and the calluses that spoke of hard work. "If your horse needs rest and feed, I can board him. Rates are fair and the stable is clean." Katherine glanced at the building behind her, a solid structure of weathered wood with a wide doorway leading into shadow-cooled interior. "How much?" 50 cents a day includes hay and grain. If you are staying longer than a week, I can do $3 for the whole time." It was reasonable, maybe even cheap compared to what he had paid in other towns. Katherine calculated quickly in his head, weighing his remaining money against his needs. I can do a week to start. Might be here longer depending on what work I can find. There is always work for a man who knows his way around cattle and horses. The ranches around here are growing, and the railroad brings more business every month. Violet took his horse's reins with easy confidence. I will get him settled. You can pay me after you find something to eat. You look half-starved. Katherine realized he was hungry, had been living on jerky and hardtack for days. Is the food at the saloon any good? Better than starving, but Mrs. Chen at the boarding house serves a proper meal for 25 cents. Turn left at the next corner, white house with blue shutters. Violet was already leading his horse toward the stable, her movements practiced and sure. Thank you. Katherine watched her for a moment longer, then turned toward the boarding house, his stomach growling in anticipation. Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had come to Nebraska during the railroad construction and stayed when she married a local merchant who later died, served him beef stew with fresh bread and coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of burnt grain. While he ate, she told him about the town, about the ranch's hiring, about the general mood of prosperity that came from good rail connections and growing cattle prices. You want work? You talk to Samuel Henderson at the Bar H Ranch, 5 miles west of town, she said, refilling his coffee cup. He is always looking for hands who know what they are doing. Or there is the Morrison spread north of here, bigger operation, more formal. Depends on what you want. Katherine thanked her, paid for his meal, and walked back toward the stable as the afternoon heat began to ease into evening. He found Violet in one of the stalls, checking his horse's hooves with careful attention. He threw a shoe on the left front, she said without looking up. Nothing serious yet, but he needs a farrier soon or he will go lame. How much will that cost? $1.50 if you want it done right. The blacksmith is my uncle, Violet Richardson. He will do good work. Katherine did the math again, watching his careful savings dwindle. Can he do it tomorrow? I will ask him tonight. Violet set down the horse's hoof and straightened, brushing hair from her forehead with the back of her hand. Your horse is a good animal, well cared for. You can tell a lot about a man by how he treats his horse. Same thing my father used to say. The words came out before Katherine thought about them, bringing a familiar ache. His father had died 10 years ago, thrown from a spooked horse and trampled, and the loss still felt fresh sometimes. Where is your family now? Violet leaned against the stall door, her expression open, genuinely curious. Father died when I was 16. Mother remarried a shopkeeper in Kansas City, has a whole new family now. I have not seen them in 5 years. Katherine realized he was telling this woman things he rarely talked about, but something about her invited honesty. I have been working ranches since I left home, moving where the work took me. That sounds lonely. Sometimes. Katherine met her eyes. Sometimes it is just the way things are. Violet nodded slowly. I understand that. After my father died, people expected me to sell the stable and find a husband, settle into a proper woman's life. But this stable is mine, built by my father's hands and kept going by mine. I am not giving it up for anyone. The fierceness in her voice stirred something in Katherine's chest, an admiration for this woman who knew what she wanted and held on to it despite what society expected. You should not have to give up anything. Tell that to half the town. She smiled, but it held an edge. Anyway, your horse is settled for the night. Come by tomorrow afternoon and my uncle will have him shoed. Katherine paid her for the week's board, counting out $3 silver that she tucked into a leather pouch at her waist. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, a brief contact that sent an unexpected jolt through him. "Where are you staying?" Violet asked, her tone casual but her eyes intent. "Have not decided yet. The hotel wants payment up front, and I am trying to make my money last until I find work. Mrs. Chen has rooms, cheaper than the hotel, and the beds are clean. I will ask her. Thank you for your help today, Violet. Just doing business." But she smiled as she said it, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her serious face into something luminous. Katherine found himself smiling back, feeling lighter than he had in weeks despite his uncertain circumstances. He tipped his hat and headed back toward the boarding house, very aware of Violet watching him until he turned the corner. Mrs. Chen did have a room, small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. She charged him $2 for the week, which left him with barely $10 to his name, but at least he had a roof and his horse was cared for. Tomorrow he would ride out to the Bar H ranch and see about work. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Katherine found his thoughts drifting back to Violet Richardson, to the way her hands moved through rope like water, to the determination in her voice when she spoke about her stable. He had met plenty of women in his travels, some pretty, some kind, some who made it clear they were interested in a cowboy passing through. But none of them had caught his attention the way Violet had in just one afternoon. He told himself it was foolish to think too much about it. He was looking for work, not romance, and even if he was interested, a woman who owned her own business probably had no use for a drifter cowboy with empty pockets and no prospects. Still, as sleep finally claimed him, his last thoughts were of brown eyes the color of good whiskey and capable hands braiding rope in the midday sun. Morning came with bright sunlight through the window and the sounds of the town waking up. Katherine washed, dressed, and went downstairs where Mrs. Chen served him eggs and bacon with more of that good coffee. He asked about borrowing a horse to ride out to the Bar H, but she shook her head. "Wait until your horse is shoed. Samuel Henderson is particular about appearance. Shows up on a lame horse and he will think you are careless." It made sense, even if it meant another day without work. Katherine spent the morning walking around Red Cloud, getting a feel for the place. It was larger than he had initially thought, with maybe 300 permanent residents and more passing through on the railroad. There were 2 general stores, a bank, the hotel, 3 saloons, a small church, a schoolhouse, and various other businesses that marked a town moving past frontier status into something more settled. He found himself drawn back to the stable around noon, telling himself it was just to check on his horse, but knowing it was more than that. Violet was there again, this time mending a saddle with the same focused attention she had given the rope braiding. She looked up when his shadow fell across her work and smiled. "You came back. Wanted to check on my horse. He is fine. My uncle will be here in an hour to do the shoeing." She set down the saddle. "You find work yet, going to the Bar H tomorrow once the horse is ready?" "Good choice. Samuel Henderson is fair, pays on time, does not cheat his hands." Violet stood, brushing leather dust from her hands. "You had lunch?" "Not yet. I was about to eat. You can join me if you want. Nothing fancy, just bread and cheese and some apples, but you are welcome to share." Katherine knew he should politely decline, should not impose, but he found himself nodding. "That would be nice. Thank you." Violet led him behind the stable to a small garden area he had not noticed before, with a few scraggly vegetables struggling in the heat and a wooden bench under the shade of a large cottonwood tree. She disappeared into a small shed that seemed to serve as her living quarters and emerged with a basket containing the promised food plus a jug of cool water from her well. They sat on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and ate in comfortable silence at first. The bread was good, baked fresh that morning, and the cheese had a sharp tang that complemented it well. The apples were small but sweet, and Katherine felt his body relaxing, the constant tension of the past weeks easing in this quiet space with this quiet woman. "Tell me about Wyoming," Violet said after a while. "What was the ranch like?" So Katherine told her about the sprawling operation in the shadow of the mountains, about the hard work and the harder winters, about the camaraderie among the hands and the satisfaction of work well done. He told her about watching sunrise from the saddle while moving cattle, about the particular smell of sagebrush after rain, about the way the wind never seemed to stop, and how you learned to live with it as a constant companion. Violet listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she understood ranch work, and in turn she told him about her father, Michael Richardson, who had come to Nebraska territory in the 1860s as a young man determined to build something lasting. He had started with nothing, she said, and built the stable through sheer stubborn will, earning trust one customer at a time until he was the preferred livery for every ranch within 20 miles. "He taught me everything," Violet said, her voice soft with memory. How to gentle a skittish horse, how to spot lameness before it became serious, how to keep books and deal with customers and not let anyone cheat you just because you are young or female. He believed I could run this place as well as any man, and he made sure I had the skills to do it. He sounds like he was a good man. The best. Violet's eyes shone with unshed tears. When he died, everyone expected me to fail. They gave me a few months before I would have to sell. But I have kept it going for 2 years now, and I will keep it going 20 more if I live that long. I do not doubt it. Katherine meant it completely. In just a day he had seen enough of Violet Richardson to know she had the determination and skill to succeed at whatever she set her mind to. "Why did you really stop when you saw me yesterday?" The question came suddenly, Violet turning to look at him directly. It was not just the rope braiding. Katherine considered lying, deflecting, but something about her directness deserved honesty. "I do not know exactly. Something about the way you looked, so focused and capable and complete in yourself. It made me want to know more." "Complete in myself," Violet repeated, testing the phrase. "I like that. People usually say I am too independent, too unwomanly, too much for my own good." People are often wrong about what makes a person worthy. "And what makes a person worthy in your view, Katherine Walsh?" Katherine thought about it, watching a pair of sparrows chase each other through the cottonwood branches above them. "Honesty, capability, kindness when it costs you something. Standing by your commitments even when it is hard. That is a good list." Violet's expression had softened, some barrier lowering. "You live by those principles. I try to. Do not always succeed, but I try." They sat in silence again, but it was different now, charged with an awareness that had not been there before. Katherine was intensely conscious of Violet beside him, of the way sunlight filtered through leaves to dapple her face, of the steady rise and fall of her breathing. He wondered what she was thinking, if she felt this pull between them, or if he was imagining it, projecting his own interest onto a woman who was simply being kind to a customer. The sound of wagon wheels on the road broke the moment. Violet stood, gathering the remains of their meal. "That will be my uncle. Come on, let us get your horse shoed." Silas Richardson was a bear of a man, well over 6 feet tall with arms like tree trunks and a beard that reached halfway down his chest. But his hands were surprisingly gentle as he examined Katherine's horse, running fingers over the hooves and legs with practiced expertise. "Good animal," he rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "Been well cared for. We will get him fixed up right." Katherine watched as Silas worked, heating iron in his portable forge and shaping shoes with precise hammer blows. Violet stood beside him, and their conversation flowed easily, ranging from horses to weather to the territorial politics that might affect Nebraska's future. She had opinions on everything, Katherine discovered, and was not shy about sharing them. She thought the railroad was the best thing that ever happened to the region, believed women should have the vote, had no patience for people who treated their animals poorly, and thought the growing tensions between ranchers and incoming farmers would lead to trouble if people did not learn to compromise. "You think about things deeply," Katherine observed after she finished a passionate speech about water rights. "Is that a polite way of saying I talk too much?" But she was smiling. "It is a way of saying I like hearing what you think." The smile widened, and Katherine felt something in his chest expand, a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. By the time Silas finished, the sun was lowering toward evening. Katherine paid him the $1.50, grimacing internally at his shrinking funds, and thanked him for the good work. Silas nodded, gave Violet a meaningful look that Katherine could not quite interpret, and departed with his forge and tools loaded back onto his wagon. "What was that look about?" Katherine asked after Silas had gone. Violet flushed slightly. "My uncle thinks I need to find a husband. He worries about me running this place alone." "Do you want to find a husband?" "Not particularly. Not unless it is someone who understands that this stable is mine and always will be, who does not expect me to give up who I am to fit into some narrow vision of what a wife should be." She met Katherine's eyes. "That is a rare kind of man. Maybe not as rare as you think." Something flickered between them, a possibility neither had spoken aloud but both felt. Katherine knew he should be careful, should not read too much into a few friendly conversations, but he could not help feeling that something significant was happening, that the course of his life was shifting in ways he could not yet see. "I should let you get back to work," he said reluctantly. "Or you could stay and help me finish mending that saddle. I will pay you in dinner. I am a decent cook, better than Mrs. Chen even if I should not say so." Katherine knew accepting was dangerous, knew he was already starting to care about this woman more than was wise for a drifter cowboy with no prospects. But he nodded anyway, following Violet back to her work area, and spent the next few hours learning how she approached saddle repair while they talked about everything and nothing. Dinner was beef stew, different from Mrs. Chen's version but equally good, cooked on a small stove in Violet's living quarters. The shed was larger inside than Katherine had expected, divided into a main living area with a table and 2 chairs, a sleeping area curtained off for privacy, and shelves lined with books that surprised him. "You read?" he asked, scanning the titles. "All the time. My father believed in education. He made sure I could read and write and figure, said ignorance was the only real sin." Violet ladled stew into bowls. "You read when I can get books. They are hard to come by when you are moving around a lot. You can borrow some of mine if you want. I am always happy to meet another reader." They ate at the small table, knees bumping occasionally in the confined space, and Katherine told Violet about the few books he had managed to read in his travels. She recommended others, promising to lend them to him, and somehow the conversation turned personal again, to hopes and dreams and fears that neither of them usually shared. "I worry sometimes that I will lose the stable anyway," Violet admitted. "That some unexpected expense will come up, and I will not have the money to cover it, or that the town will grow and change in ways that leave me behind. It is not easy competing with the new liveries that have more capital to invest. But you have something they do not have, reputation. People trust you because they trusted your father and because you have proven yourself. I hope that is enough." She looked at him across the table, vulnerability showing through her usual confidence. "What do you worry about, Cade?" that I will never stop drifting, that I will be 50 years old and still moving from ranch to ranch with nothing to show for my life. The admission cost him something, but Violet's honesty deserved his own. I am good at the work, but the work never leads anywhere. You get older, slower, and eventually no one wants to hire you anymore. So why not find a place to settle, buy your own land, start your own operation? Takes money I do not have, takes roots I have never grown anywhere. Maybe you have not found the right place yet. Violet's voice was soft, her eyes steady on his. Maybe, Katherine agreed, and the word hung between them heavy with meaning. He left shortly after, walking back to the boarding house through streets lit by oil lamps and starlight, his mind full of Violet Richardson. He was being a fool, he told himself. He had known her one day, less than 24 hours since he first saw her braiding rope in the midday sun. You did not fall for someone that fast. It was not reasonable or rational or smart. But his heart, never particularly reasonable or rational, did not seem to care about smart. The next morning Katherine rode out to the Bar H ranch on his newly shoed horse, following directions Mrs. Chen had given him. The operation was impressive, with a large main house, bunkhouse, barn, and corrals all well maintained and showing prosperity. Samuel Henderson, a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake, interviewed Katherine with questions that proved he knew the business inside and out. "You have good references," Henderson said, scanning the letter Katherine had from his last employer. The McCready Ranch was well respected before it went under. Not their fault. That winter killed a lot of good operations. I can offer you $30 a month plus room and board. We are moving cattle to summer pasture next week. Then it is fence repair and general maintenance through the season. Come winter we will be calving, and that is when we really earn our keep. You interested?" "Yes, sir, I am." $30 a month was standard, maybe even slightly generous, and the work sounded familiar, comfortable. "Good. You can move into the bunkhouse tomorrow. We eat breakfast at 5, start work by 6. Katherine shook Henderson's hand, feeling relief flood through him. He had work, steady work that would last into winter at least and possibly longer if he proved himself. He would be able to pay his bills, build up some savings, maybe even start planning for a future that went beyond the next job. He rode back to Red Cloud that afternoon with his spirits higher than they had been in months, and without even thinking about it, he headed straight to the stable. Violet was working with a horse in the corral, teaching it to accept a saddle with patient repetition. She saw him approach and her face lit up in a way that made Katherine's chest tight. "You got the job," she said, reading his expression. "Start tomorrow. 30 a month plus room and board. Congratulations." She tied off the horse and came to the fence. "When do you have to move out to the ranch?" "Tomorrow." Katherine realized what that meant. "I will not be in town much, maybe once a month on paydays." Something flickered across Violet's face, disappointment maybe, but she masked it quickly. "Well, it is good work. Samuel Henderson is a good man to work for." "Violet." Katherine did not know what he was going to say until the words came out. "I would like to see you again, more than just when I come to town for supplies. Would you now?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were serious. "Why is that, Katherine Walsh?" "Because I like you. Because talking to you these past 2 days has been the best part of stopping in Red Cloud. Because I think there might be something here worth exploring if you are interested." "I am interested," Violet said quietly, "but I need you to understand something. I will not give up my stable for anyone. I will not become the kind of wife who exists to serve her husband. If you are looking for that kind of woman, I am not her. I do not want that kind of woman. I want you, Violet Richardson, exactly as you are. It has been 2 days. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. Let me come back on my days off and learn everything there is to learn. Let me prove I mean what I say." Violet studied him for a long moment, and Katherine felt like his entire future balanced on whatever she decided. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Come back when you can. We will see where this goes." Katherine felt something inside him settle, like a wild horse finally accepting a rope. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. You might decide I am too much trouble." "I doubt that very much." They stood on opposite sides of the fence, smiling at each other like fools, until Violet laughed and said she had to get back to work. Katherine reluctantly headed to the boarding house to gather his few possessions and say goodbye to Mrs. Chen, who wished him luck with knowing eyes that suggested she understood more than he had said. That night, his last in town before moving to the ranch, Katherine lay awake thinking about Violet. He knew he was taking a risk, opening his heart to the possibility of pain if things did not work out. But the alternative, walking away without trying, felt infinitely worse. For the first time in years, Katherine could see a potential future that was more than just the next job. And that vision centered on a tall woman with brown eyes and capable hands who braided rope like poetry and refused to compromise who she was for anyone. He rode out to the bar before dawn, leaving his goodbyes to Violet unspoken, because saying them in person would have been too hard. Better to go quietly and come back when he could, building whatever was growing between them one visit at a time. The work at the bar was exactly what Katherine had expected. Long days in the saddle, physical labor that left him exhausted, the companionship of other ranch hands who became familiar if not exactly friends. He was good at it, better than some of the younger hands, and Samuel Henderson noticed. Within 2 weeks, Katherine had been promoted to lead hand on the fence repair crew, which came with an extra $5 a month and Henderson's obvious respect. But no matter how busy the days were, Katherine's thoughts drifted to Violet. He wondered what she was doing if she thought about him, if she had changed her mind about giving him a chance. 3 weeks after starting at the bar Henderson gave the hands a day off, and Katherine rode into Red Cloud with his first month's wages burning a hole in his pocket. He found Violet in the stable, braiding rope again, and the sight of her made his heart skip. She looked up, saw him, and the smile that spread across her face told him everything he needed to know. "You came back." "I said I would." Katherine dismounted, suddenly nervous despite everything. "How have you been?" "Busy. We had a horse go lame last week and I had to nurse it back to health. Mrs. Chen's cat had kittens in my hay loft. The bank tried to tell me I owed back taxes I did not actually owe, and I had to spend a day sorting it out." She set down the rope and came to him. "I missed you." The admission clearly cost her something, this independent woman who guarded herself carefully. Katherine reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses and warmth of it. "I missed you too, thought about you every day." "Did you?" Violet's voice was soft. "Every single day." Katherine squeezed her hand gently. "Can I take you to dinner? Somewhere nice, a proper courting dinner. Red Cloud does not really have anywhere fancy, but the hotel restaurant serves decent food." Violet glanced down at herself. "I will need to clean up first. I will wait." She disappeared into her living quarters and emerged 20 minutes later transformed. She still wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but her hair was down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders, and she had clearly washed and changed. Katherine found himself staring again, struck by how beautiful she was when she let herself be seen. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Violet said, taking in his own efforts at making himself presentable. "I do my best." Dinner at the hotel was nothing fancy by city standards, but for Red Cloud it was the height of elegance. They had chicken with potatoes and vegetables, pie for dessert, and coffee that was actually hot. They talked through the whole meal, Katherine telling her about life at the bar and Violet sharing the small dramas and victories of running the stable. Other diners noticed them, and Katherine saw the speculative looks, people wondering about the stable owner and the new cowboy at the bar. Let them wonder, Violet said when he mentioned it. Small towns thrive on gossip. We will just give them something worth talking about. After dinner, they walked through town as evening descended, finding their way to the small creek that ran behind the buildings. They sat on the bank, shoulders touching, watching the water flow past while fireflies began their nightly dance. "Tell me what you want, Cade," Violet said. "Not what you think I want to hear, but what you really want from your life." Katherine thought about it seriously, knowing his answer mattered. "I want to stop drifting. I want to find a place that feels like home and build something there, something that lasts. I want work that means something that I can take pride in. And I want someone to share it with, someone who is a partner, not just a companion." "That is a good answer." Violet leaned her head against his shoulder. "I want to keep my stable and make it grow. I want to prove everyone wrong who thought I would fail. I want to wake up every day and know I am living my life on my own terms. And I want someone who understands that, who does not feel threatened by my independence but admires it." "I think we want compatible things," Katherine said carefully. "I think we do too." They sat in comfortable silence, the tension between them building until finally Katherine gathered his courage and turned to her. "Can I kiss you, Violet? I thought you would never ask." Her lips were soft and she tasted like apple pie and coffee, and kissing her felt like coming home after years of wandering. It started gentle but deepened quickly, months or maybe years of loneliness finding answer in each other. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Katherine rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he whispered. "I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but it is true." "It is fast," Violet agreed, "but I am falling too. I have been since that first day watching you watch me braid rope. What do we do about it? We keep doing this. You come see me when you can. We write letters in between. We learn each other and see if what we feel now lasts." She pulled back to look at him. "I need time, Cade. I need to be sure before I make any promises. I have worked too hard to build my life to risk it on something that might not last. I understand. I am not going anywhere." They walked back to the stable as full darkness fell, holding hands like young lovers despite being well past their first youth. At her door, Violet kissed him again, fierce and sweet, then pushed him gently away. "Go back to the ranch before it is too late to ride safely. Come see me again in 2 weeks." 2 weeks, Katherine agreed, though it felt like an eternity. He rode back to the bar in the dark, his horse knowing the way, his heart fuller than it had been in years. The other hands noticed his good mood and teased him about having a girl in town, but Katherine did not mind. Let them tease. He did have a girl, an extraordinary woman who made him want to be better, do more, build something lasting. The next 2 weeks dragged by slowly despite the constant work. Katherine threw himself into every task, earning more of Henderson's respect and the friendship of his fellow hands. At night, he wrote letters to Violet by lamplight, telling her about his days and asking about hers. Her replies came back with Mrs. Chen's son, who rode out weekly with supplies, and Katherine treasured every word. She wrote about the daily running of the stable, about difficult customers and horses with personality, about the slowly growing savings she hoped would let her expand someday. She asked him questions about his past, about his family and his dreams, and Katherine answered honestly, holding nothing back. With every letter they learned each other, building foundations slowly and carefully. When 2 weeks passed, Katherine rode back to Red Cloud with Henderson's permission, and a specific question burning in his mind. He found Violet shoeing a horse herself, having learned the skill from her uncle, and waited until she finished before approaching. "You are early," she said, pleasure evident in her voice. "Could not wait." Katherine pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I have been thinking about something and I wanted to discuss it with you." They sat on the bench under the cottonwood tree, and Katherine laid out the idea that had been forming in his mind. He had been watching how the Bar H operated, seeing what worked and what did not, and he had been calculating his savings and thinking about possibilities. "I can save money working for Henderson," he said. "In 2 years, maybe 3, I could have enough to buy a small piece of land. Nothing huge, but enough to run maybe 50 head of cattle. I could build it slow, keep working for Henderson part-time to make ends meet while I get established." "That sounds like a good plan," Violet said carefully. "Where would you buy this land?" "I was thinking somewhere near Red Cloud, close enough that I could be near you if you want that." Violet was quiet for a moment, and Katherine felt anxiety twist in his gut. Maybe he had presumed too much, moved too fast despite his intentions to give her time. "I want that," Violet finally said. "But Cade, you need to understand something. If we do this, if we build a life together, my stable does not become yours. It stays mine. What you build is yours. We are partners, but we keep our independence." "That is exactly what I want. I do not want to own you or your work, Violet. I want to stand beside you while we each do what we are good at. Then yes, I want you near. I want to see where this goes, build something together while keeping our own identities." She took his hand. "Thank you for understanding what I need. Thank you for giving me a chance." They sealed it with a kiss, and Katherine felt pieces of his future clicking into place. It would not be easy, he knew. Building a ranch from nothing never was. But with Violet beside him, supporting him while pursuing her own goals, it felt possible in a way nothing ever had before. The months that followed fell into a pattern. Katherine worked hard at the Bar H, saving every penny he could spare. He visited Violet weekly when he could manage it, less often when work prevented it, but they wrote letters constantly. Their relationship deepened slowly, built on real knowledge of each other rather than romantic fantasy. They disagreed sometimes, about politics or methods or silly things, but they learned to talk through differences with respect. Violet's stable continued to thrive. She hired a young man to help with the heavy work, freeing her to focus on the business aspects, and her reputation grew. Ranchers from 50 miles away brought their horses to her when they needed skilled care. She started breeding horses too, a side venture that showed promise, and Katherine watched with pride as she succeeded on her own terms. Winter came harsh and cold, testing everyone. The cattle at the Bar H suffered through blizzards and bitter temperatures, and Katherine worked 16-hour days keeping them alive. When he finally made it to town after a month unable to leave the ranch, he found Violet had been equally busy, dealing with horses suffering from the cold and owners unable to pay their bills on time. They spent that evening in her living quarters, Katherine sitting by the stove while Violet made dinner and talked about hard times and how to survive them. It was not romantic in the traditional sense, but it felt deeply intimate, this sharing of burdens and strategies. "I am buying the Porter place," Katherine said during a lull in the conversation. 160 acres, 5 miles from town. The old man died and his kids want to sell. Henderson is willing to lend me half the money and I have saved the rest. I will own it free and clear in 5 years if I can make the payments. Violet turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand. "That is a big step." "It is, but I am ready. Henderson says I can keep working for him part-time while I build up my own herd, and I have some ideas about how to make it work." Katherine paused. I want you to see it before I finalize anything. Make sure it is something you can accept, living near. Living near, Violet repeated. Is that all you are thinking about? I do not want to presume. Katherine stood, moving closer to her. Violet, I love you, have for months now, but I know you need your independence and I respect that. So I am building something of my own, near you but separate, so we can choose how we want to be together without either of us having to give up who we are. Tears shone in Violet's eyes. You understand me better than anyone ever has. So come see the land with me tomorrow. Tell me what you think. They rode out the next day, bundled against the cold, and Katherine showed Violet the property that would become his. It was good land, with a creek running through it and shelter from the worst winds. The house was small but sound, needing work but livable. There was a barn that needed repairs and corrals that needed rebuilding, but the bones were good. I can see it, Violet said, sitting on her horse and surveying the property. I can see what you are planning, see how it could work. Can you see yourself here? Katherine held his breath. Not living here, Violet said, and Katherine's heart sank until she continued. My place is at the stable in town. That will not change, but visiting here, helping you build this, sharing time between your place and mine. Yes, I can see that. It was not a traditional arrangement, but Katherine had never wanted traditional. He wanted Violet, wanted whatever life they could build together that honored both their needs. Then I am buying it. The winter finally released its grip, giving way to spring. Katherine finalized the purchase of the Porter place and began the slow work of making it his own. He spent his mornings at the bar fulfilling his obligations there, and his afternoons and evenings working his own land. It was exhausting, but every post he set and every fence he mended was his, and that made all the difference. Violet came out when she could, bringing meals and advice and sometimes just her presence while he worked. They grew closer through the shared labor, learning each other's rhythms and habits. She was particular about how things should be done, insisting on quality over speed, and Katherine found he loved that about her even when it frustrated him. Summer arrived with heat and hard work. Katherine bought 10 head of cattle, all he could afford, and began building his herd. It was a tiny start, almost laughable compared to the operations he had worked for, but they were his cattle on his land, and he tended them with fierce dedication. One evening in late June, after a long day of work, Katherine and Violet sat on the porch of his little house watching sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. They had been courting for nearly a year now, learning each other through seasons and challenges, and Katherine knew with bone-deep certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with this woman. Violet, he said, his heart pounding, I want to ask you something. She turned to him, eyebrow raised. That sounds serious. It is. Katherine took her hand. I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and your refusal to be anything other than who you are. I love how you braid rope and gentle horses and keep your books. I love arguing with you about politics and listening to you read aloud and working beside you. I want to spend my life with you. Cade. Wait, let me finish. I know you need your independence. I know the stable is yours and will always be yours. I am not asking you to give that up or change who you are. I am just asking if you will marry me and we can figure out together what that looks like for us. Tears spilled down Violet's cheeks. You really mean that? You really understand what I need? I really do. Then yes. Yes, I will marry you, Cade Walsh, and we will build something together that has never existed before. Katherine pulled her close and kissed her, tasting salt from her tears and feeling his own eyes water. They sat on the porch until full dark, making plans that honored both their dreams, creating a life that was uniquely theirs. They married in August of 1879, A small ceremony in Red Cloud's church with Mrs. Chen and Silas Richardson and Samuel Henderson as witnesses. Violet wore a dress the color of cream and carried wildflowers picked that morning. Katherine wore his best clothes and thought he might burst from happiness when she said, "I do." The town talked, of course, about the unusual arrangement where the wife kept her own business and the husband had his ranch, and they split their time between town and country. But Katherine and Violet did not care what the town said. They knew what they were building, and they knew it was right. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. They learned to balance time between the stable and the ranch, between Violet's work and Katherine's. Sometimes it was hard, when work pulled them in different directions or exhaustion made them short with each other. But they talked through every problem, compromising and adjusting, building a partnership that worked for them. Katherine's ranch grew slowly. He bought more cattle as he could afford them, improved his land bit by bit, and kept working part-time for Henderson to ensure steady income. Violet's stable continued to thrive, and she expanded into selling tack and equipment alongside boarding services. They were both successful on their own terms, and that success felt sweeter because it was shared. In the spring of 1880, Violet discovered she was pregnant. The news filled Katherine with joy and terror in equal measure. They had talked about children, but now it was real, and they had to figure out how a baby fit into their complicated life. "The stable has a young man who can manage it when I need him to," Violet said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I will not give it up, but I can adjust while the baby is small. And I can bring the baby out to the ranch with me when you need to work," Katherine added. "We will figure it out together." Their son was born in December of 1880, arriving during the first blizzard of winter. Violet labored for 16 hours while Katherine paced and prayed, and when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in his arms, Katherine felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "What should we name him?" Violet asked, exhausted but radiant. "Michael," Katherine said without hesitation. "After your father." Violet cried then, happy tears that spoke of healing and honoring and love. Baby Michael was colicky and demanding, sleeping little and crying much. But Katherine and Violet tackled parenthood the way they tackled everything else. Together, with patience and determination, and occasional exhausted laughter at 3 in the morning. They learned to balance the baby with their work, taking turns and supporting each other, and somehow they made it work. Katherine's ranch continued to grow. By 1882, he had 50 head of cattle and had paid off his debt to Henderson. By 1884, he had 100 head and hired his first ranch hand. Violet's stable expanded too, with a new barn built in 1883 and a breeding program that produced sought-after horses. Young Michael grew up between two worlds, equally comfortable in the stable and on the ranch, learning from both his parents. In 1885, Violet became pregnant again, and their daughter arrived that autumn, easier than Michael had been. They named her Emma after Katherine's mother, and she proved to be a calm baby who slept well and smiled easily. Michael, now 5 years old, was fascinated by his little sister and helped care for her with endearing seriousness. The years flowed past, marked by seasons and work and children growing. Michael proved to have his mother's way with horses, while Emma showed Katherine's patience with cattle. They had a third child in 1888, another boy they named Samuel after Henderson, who had become like a father to Katherine. The ranch prospered beyond Katherine's wildest dreams. By 1890, he had 300 head of cattle and had bought adjoining land, expanding to 400 acres. He built a proper house, bigger than the original homestead, with enough rooms for their growing family and a separate office where Violet could manage her stable's accounts when she stayed on the ranch. But Violet never gave up the stable. She ran it for 40 years, finally selling it in 1918 when she was 60 years old and ready to slow down. Even then, she negotiated to keep her small house behind it, the place where she and Katherine had first shared meals and dreams, and she went there weekly until she was too old to make the trip. Katherine ran his ranch until he was 65, then gradually turned it over to Michael, who had grown into a fine rancher in his own right. Emma married a farmer from the next county, and Samuel became a horse trader, traveling the West much as his father once had but always returning home. They grew old together, Katherine and Violet, their hair turning gray and then white, their hands developing arthritis that made work harder but never stopped them completely. They split their time between the ranch house and Violet's little place behind the stable, comfortable in both locations, still partners after decades of marriage. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate. Katherine was 77 years old, Violet 71, and they sat surrounded by the family and legacy they had built together. "Tell us how you met," one of the grandchildren asked, a little girl of 6 who loved stories. Katherine looked at Violet, saw the same love in her eyes that had been there 50 years ago, and smiled. "I found her braiding rope at Midday," he said, "and I knew right then that my life was about to change." "I saw him watching me," Violet added, taking Katherine's weathered hand in her own. "And I thought, here is a man who sees me, really sees me, so I decided to let him into my life." "And you lived happily ever after?" the little girl asked hopefully. "Not happily ever after," Violet corrected gently. "Happy and after. We had hard times and good times, disagreements and reconciliations, challenges and triumphs. But we faced all of it together, and that made all the difference." "Happy and after," Katherine repeated, squeezing Violet's hand. "That is exactly right." They lived 6 more years together, dying within months of each other in 1935. Katherine went first, his heart simply stopping one morning while he fed cattle, and Violet followed that summer. People said from a broken heart, but really from a life fully lived and now complete. They were buried side by side in the Red Cloud Cemetery, their matching headstones simple but elegant. Katherine's read, "He found her braiding rope and braided his life with hers." Violet's read, "She braided rope and hearts with equal skill." The ranch stayed in the family for 3 more generations. The stable building was eventually torn down, and Red Cloud grew from a frontier town into a modern city. But people still told the story of Katherine Walsh and Violet Richardson, the cowboy and the stable owner who built an unusual marriage that worked precisely because they respected each other's independence while choosing to be together. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the lesson they had lived. That love is not about possession or control, but about partnership and respect, about 2 people building something together while remaining fully themselves. It was a lesson learned from watching Violet braid rope with sure hands, from seeing Katherine build a ranch through determination and sweat, from witnessing 50 years of marriage that never demanded either partner become less than they were. The rope Violet had been braiding that first day, the one Katherine interrupted, hung for years in their ranch house. It was not particularly special, just hemp twisted into something useful, but it represented everything they had built together. 2 people, independent and strong, choosing to braid their lives together while remaining distinct strands, creating something stronger than either could have made alone. That was their legacy, passed down through generations. Not a fairy tale romance, but a real love story, built on respect and communication and daily choice. It began with rope braided in midday sun and ended with a shared grave in Nebraska soil. And every moment between was earned through work and patience and the determination to create something lasting in a hard land. Katherine had been a drifter cowboy with empty pockets and no clear future. Violet had been an independent woman fighting to keep what was hers in a world that believed women should not own anything. Together, they became partners who built prosperity and family, and a love that sustained them through 50 years of marriage and beyond into the memories of those who came after. It was exactly the kind of story the Wild West produced. Hardworking people making lives in harsh conditions, building something from nothing through stubborn determination. But it was also a love story as old as time, two people finding each other and choosing every day to stay together. The braided rope eventually fell apart, hemp degrading over the years until it was just dust. But what it represented lasted much longer, carried forward in the values Katherine and Violet instilled in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch and stable that bore witness to their partnership, in the town of Red Cloud that grew and prospered partly because of their contributions. Sometimes, on summer afternoons, people walking past the old stable site swore they could smell rope and leather, could almost see a tall woman with dark hair braiding hemp in the shade, could hear the sound of a horse approaching, and a man's voice saying something kind. It was probably just imagination, nostalgia for times that seemed simpler from a distance, but maybe it was something more. Maybe it was the echo of a moment when everything changed, when a drifting cowboy found an independent woman, and they chose to build something lasting together. Maybe it was the ghost of a great love story, still haunting the place where it began, reminding everyone who passed that the best things in life are built slowly, with respect and patience and the courage to try something new. Katherine found Violet braiding rope at midday on a hot June afternoon in 1878, and that chance encounter changed the trajectory of both their lives. They braided their lives together the way Violet braided rope, carefully, skillfully, with intention and patience, creating something strong enough to last through decades and challenges and everything life threw at them. It was not always easy. Building a marriage that honored both partners' independence while creating genuine partnership required constant communication and compromise. There were times when Katherine resented Violet's dedication to the stable, when he wished she would focus more on the ranch. There were times when Violet felt smothered by Katherine's expectations, when she needed space he was not ready to give. But they talked through every problem, adjusted and readjusted, and always came back to the foundation they had built on respect and love. Their children watched and learned. Michael learned that a man could be strong while supporting his wife's independence. Emma learned that a woman did not have to choose between family and personal ambition. Samuel learned that the best marriages were partnerships of equals. Those lessons shaped how they approached their own relationships, creating ripples that extended far beyond Katherine and Violet's immediate family. The town of Red Cloud watched too. Other women saw Violet's success and thought maybe they could keep their businesses after marriage. Other men saw Katherine's pride in his wife's accomplishments and reconsidered their assumptions about proper gender roles. Slowly, incrementally, things changed, and while Katherine and Violet were not solely responsible for those changes, they were part of them, their unusual marriage providing a model others could follow. When Katherine died in 1935, surrounded by children and grandchildren in the house he had built, his last words were about Violet. "Take care of her," he whispered to Michael, though Violet was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. "She made my life worth living." Violet spent the last months of her life putting her affairs in order with characteristic efficiency. She divided her property fairly among her children, wrote down family stories for future generations, and spent long afternoons in the little house behind where the stable had been, remembering. When she died that August, people said she looked peaceful, as if she was going somewhere she wanted to be. Their funeral was the largest red cloud had seen in years. People came from across Nebraska and beyond, ranchers and horse breeders and business people whose lives Katherine and Violet had touched. Samuel Henderson's son gave a eulogy that spoke of integrity and partnership, of two people who had done things their own way and succeeded beyond measure. The ranch continued under Michael's management, then his son's, and thrived into the 21st century. The stable lot was eventually sold and developed, but a historical marker was placed there in 1965, commemorating Violet Richardson Walsh and her pioneering role in Nebraska's horse breeding industry. Katherine's contribution to ranching in the region was similarly recognized, his innovative practices becoming standard and spreading far beyond his original 160 acres. But their real legacy was not the businesses or the historical markers, or the family fortune that grew over generations. It was the proof that two people could love each other deeply while remaining fully themselves, that marriage did not require surrender of identity, that partnership and independence could coexist beautifully. The rope Violet had been braiding that first day was never finished. She had set it aside to talk to Katherine and never picked it up again, distracted by more important things like building a relationship that would last a lifetime. But in a way, she had been braiding ever since, weaving her life with Katherine's, creating something strong and flexible and beautiful that held fast through everything. That was what Katherine saw that first day, watching her fingers fly through hemp in the midday sun. Not just skill with rope, but the essence of who she was, capable, determined, complete in herself yet open to connection. And that was what made him stop, made him speak to her, made him take the first step on a journey that would define the rest of his life. Violet saw something too when she looked up and met his eyes. She saw respect, genuine interest, a man who could watch a woman work without feeling threatened or superior. She saw someone who might understand what she needed, might be willing to build the kind of relationship she had always wanted but never thought she could have. They were right, both of them. They found in each other exactly what they needed, and they had the wisdom to recognize it and the courage to pursue it despite every obstacle. The result was a love story for the ages, Wild West romance grounded in reality, cinematic in its sweep but believable in its details. Somewhere in Red Cloud, Nebraska, where the stable once stood and the ranch still operates, the spirit of that love story lingers. It lives in the values passed down through generations, in the businesses built on foundations they laid, in the changed attitudes about what marriage could be. It lives in the stories still told about the cowboy and the stable owner who did things their own way and made it work. Most of all, it lives in the simple truth they proved through 50 years together. That love is a choice, made new every day, and the best love stories are the ones where both people choose freely, from positions of strength and independence, to braid their lives together into something greater than either could create alone. Katherine found Violet braiding rope at Midday. The cowboy braided his life with hers, and together they created something beautiful, lasting, and true.